It started like any other summer afternoon, the hum of sprinklers, the sparkle of sunlight on blue water, a woman, strong, calm, proud, finally taking a moment to breathe. But peace doesn't last long when prejudice has a phone. Within minutes, flashing lights cut through her quiet street. Officers rushed in, neighbors watched, and whispers turned to accusations. She was in her backyard, yet treated like an intruder. What none of them realized was that the woman they were confronting didn't just protect this community, she led it. Her name was Chief Alicia Grant, a time-based 42-year-old police chief who'd spent over 2 decades serving her community. Calm under pressure, respected by her team, and known for the kind of integrity that couldn't be faked. Every day she dealt with the city's toughest problems, protecting people who often never knew her name. Yet today wasn't about duty or service. It was her one day off, a chance to simply exist without the badge, without the weight of the world on her shoulders. Her backyard was her escape. The pool, a small reflection of peace in a life built on discipline and sacrifice. The sunlight shimmered on the water as she stretched out on a lounge chair, eyes closed, finally allowing herself to rest. But in the quiet suburb where she'd recently moved, not everyone saw her the same way. Some neighbors waved politely, others stared a little too long. She'd felt it before, the subtle pause, the hesitant glance that said you don't belong here. She tried to ignore it. She always did. After all, she'd earned everything she had. But prejudice doesn't care about titles or achievements. It only sees color. And as the afternoon heat settled over the neighborhood, one uneasy gaze from across the fence would be enough to turn her moment of peace into something far more dangerous. Because on this day, someone decided she didn't look like she belonged, and one phone call would change everything. The sun hung high, blazing over the quiet cul-de-sac. Chief Alicia Grant leaned back, letting her mind drift away from patrol reports, policy meetings, and the endless calls that came with the badge. For once, she was just Alicia. No title, no uniform, no armor. Across the fence, a curtain shifted, then another. A camera lens glinted faintly through a second-floor window. She noticed but brushed it off. After all, she had nothing to hide, but not everyone saw it that way. Next door, a woman whispered into her phone, her voice sharp with suspicion. "There's someone in the Johnsons' backyard. I think she's trespassing. She doesn't live there." The dispatcher asked for a description. The woman hesitated, then said it quietly, almost reflexively. A black woman. Minutes later, the faint hum of sirens broke the stillness. The sound was distant at first, like a bad memory, but it grew louder, closer, until it was right outside. Alicia's eyes opened. She sat up, instantly alert, her instincts sharpening. Old habits never died, even on her day off. She heard doors slam, voices radioing, the sound of heavy boots on asphalt. She wrapped her towel around herself, confused but calm, walking toward the gate to see what was happening. And then she saw them, 3 officers, hands resting near their holsters, scanning her yard like it was a crime scene. "Ma'am, we got a call about a trespasser," one said, cautious, his eyes darting between her and the pool. Alicia felt her pulse quicken, not from guilt but disbelief. Trespasser? She thought. In my own home? The officers didn't recognize her, no badge, no uniform, no authority on display. Just a woman standing barefoot by her pool, the color of her skin becoming the only credential they noticed. One officer spoke into his radio. Another kept his hand near his weapon. The air grew heavy, electric with the unspoken. Alicia tried to steady her breathing. She knew this routine. She'd seen it from the other side too many times. The cautious approach, the suspicion before understanding, the hesitation that could turn deadly. "Do you have ID, ma'am?" one asked. She almost laughed, not out of humor but disbelief. The irony was cruel. Inside that house, in a drawer by the kitchen door, lay a badge that gave her authority over every officer in this district. And yet here she stood, being treated like a threat on her own property. Her neighbors watched from behind curtains. Phones recorded. Whispers turned to murmurs. No one stepped forward to say, "She lives there." No one wanted to be wrong. Alicia spoke slowly, carefully, each word measured. "My ID is inside the house," she said. "This is my home." The officers exchanged glances. Doubt still lingered. One muttered something into his shoulder mic. Another took a cautious step forward. The world felt still again. Sun blazing, pool water shimmering, every sound amplified by tension. She knew one wrong gesture could change everything. Then came the voice from the radio, faint but unmistakable. "Dispatch confirms address belongs to Chief Alicia Grant." The officers froze. One blinked, realization sinking in. Another lowered his hand from his weapon, his posture shifting from authority to apology. But by then it was too late. The damage was already done. Her peace had been shattered, her dignity tested, her identity doubted, all in the span of a single phone call. And as the officers looked at her with sudden regret, Alicia said nothing. She didn't need to. The silence between them said it all. For a long, frozen second, no one moved. The air felt heavy, thick with a silence louder than any siren. The officers stood there realizing the mistake they'd made, but the moment of danger had already come and gone, and Alicia could feel the weight of it pressing against her chest. She looked at their faces, uncertain, embarrassed, suddenly cautious. The same men who moments ago saw her as a potential threat now shifted their posture, their voices softer, their tone apologetic. But apology didn't erase the fear that had crept in when their hands hovered too close to their guns. Alicia turned, walked slowly into her house, and returned with a small black leather wallet. She flipped it open, her badge gleaming in the sunlight. The gold insignia caught their eyes first, but it was the name underneath that made their throats tighten. Chief Alicia Grant. The silence deepened. One officer stepped back, eyes wide, stammering an apology. Another tried to explain, tripping over his own words. We just got a call. Thought you were... She cut him off with a calm, deliberate voice. Thought I was what? No one answered. Behind her, neighbors stood frozen in doorways, camera phones still recording. Their faces, some shocked, some guilty, some pretending not to care, told her everything she needed to know. She had worn that badge for 20 years. It had opened doors, commanded respect, symbolized justice. But in this moment it couldn't even protect her in her own backyard. Alicia's hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from something deeper, a quiet, burning anger. The kind that builds slowly over years of seeing the same story play out again and again. She looked at the officers, her voice low but steady. You came here ready for danger. All because someone saw a black woman by a pool. One of them looked down. The other shifted uncomfortably. She took a slow breath. Now tell me, how do you serve a community when you're afraid of the people you're supposed to protect? The words hung in the air, cutting sharper than any command she'd ever given. No one dared to respond. The body cams were still rolling. The phones were still recording. And for the first time that afternoon, the truth was being documented from every angle. Because this moment, this humiliation, this confrontation, was no longer just about her. It was about every time someone's skin color became their threat. The sirens were gone. The officers too. But the echo of what happened lingered long after the street fell quiet again. Chief Alicia Grant sat at the edge of her pool, staring at the water that once felt peaceful. Now it reflected something else, a reminder that no matter how far she'd climbed, no matter what title she'd earned, she could still be seen as a threat in her own home. The videos from that day spread fast. A few seconds of footage recorded from shaky phones replayed across social media. Officers confronting a woman in her own backyard. At first, people didn't know who she was. Then, when they learned she was the city's police chief, the outrage grew louder. News headlines called it a misunderstanding, but Alicia knew better. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a mirror, one showing a truth this country still struggles to face. The department issued an apology. The officers were placed under review. The neighbor deleted her social media and stopped making eye contact when she passed Alicia's house. But none of it erased the sting of that afternoon, because the real damage wasn't in the actions, it was in the assumption. For weeks, Alicia avoided her backyard. The pool no longer felt like rest, it felt like a reminder that respect, authority, and safety can all vanish when seen through the wrong eyes. Yet she didn't stay silent. At the next city press conference, she stood before cameras not as a victim, but as a leader. Her voice steady, her eyes sharp. She spoke not just about her experience, but about the silent bias that shaped it, about how fear disguises itself as suspicion, about how systems can't change until the people within them do. Her words spread further than the video ever did. And for once, the story didn't end with humiliation. It ended with awareness. Still, as she walked off that stage, she knew awareness alone wasn't enough. Change is never comfortable. It begins in those moments when people finally confront what they'd rather ignore. She looked back at the cameras, at the faces in the crowd, and thought of the thousands of others who never got the chance to speak their truth. Alicia Grant had survived the moment, but countless others didn't. And that's the real question, isn't it? How many more stories like hers will it take before suspicion stops being stronger than empathy?